Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. It's Friday afternoon and an opportunity to chat with right-wing granny. Mary Griswold joins us from New Bern. And Mary, good afternoon to you. I'm looking forward to today's conversation. I know one of the topics we're going to get into is legislation in the states of New York and Virginia. But let's start with first, a good afternoon to you and what's on tap today for right-wing granny.
Well, good afternoon, and I'm looking at a preview of next week. I think next week is going to be a very interesting week for all of us.
So you're looking at the State of the Union address, I guess?
I'm looking at the State of the Union. I'm looking at the fact that the acting Attorney General Whitaker will be testifying before the House Judiciary Committee.
Mm-hmm.
William Barr?
William Barr, the Attorney General
will have his
applicant.
confirmations hearing next week.
Whoa. Yeah, that's very interesting. We've got a busy week ahead of us.
Yes, and the House Judiciary Committee, isn't that the one that Adam Schiff is the head of now?
He is, that's correct. Yes.
Oh, Lord. that is going to be... Whitaker is going to be testifying before a hostile group. I think we can assume that.
Well, the other aspect of this, and of course, the concern is the soon-to-be, and I'm pretty confident that he will be acknowledged as the new Attorney General, being William Barr. My question is, how much of this plays into the hands, in your opinion, of the concerns associated with the Mueller investigation and, for that matter, efforts being still discussed on the potential of impeachment proceedings?
Well, I think there's a book that has recently come out by Sidney Powell called License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice. You mean to tell me that there is a federal government that may have corrupt officials in it? I know, the horror of it all.
I can't imagine, and definitely not in the FBI, the IRS, the EPA. I can't imagine that. And of course, everyone in Washington is of the highest principles. Excuse me, I'm in the wrong universe.
There's something in the water, I think. One of the people that she talks about in her book is Andrew Weissman, who is Robert Mueller's right-hand man.
Right.
And she goes back into some of his history with Arthur Anderson, and the conviction there was overturned by the Supreme Court unanimously.
Right.
When was the last time the Supreme Court did anything
unanimously? But,
yes.
But the other aspect of it is it's an overturning of a decision that was perpetrated, I use that word, precipitated, let's use that word instead, by a federal agency. So in essence, the Supreme Court, if you get right down to it, was very critical of what the Justice Department had done. And
the problem with that is the actions of Andrew Weissman totally destroyed the company, its employees, and its investors.
Right.
And something similar went on with Merrill Lynch, where people were charged and they were eventually exonerated, but they wound up, one of them served 8 months in solitary confinement. That's horrible.
Associated with this, and again, Mary Griswold with us, Right Wing Granny, and by the way, that's the blog site, rightwinggranny.com. We're going to be chatting with her about some of the items she's got posted in this recent blog. But back to the issue of the upcoming week. So your concern, I gather, Mary, is that is there a possibly confluence of issues that are going to either confuse the public, or will they be designed in some fashion to set up, if you will, bullet points to be connected one dot after another?
Well, let's start with the State of the Union address. President Trump is a very good communicator, and he has the ability to communicate with those of us who consider ourselves average Americans. He communicates with us as well as he communicates with some of the millionaires and billionaires that he occasionally hangs out with. That is his gift. That is a threat to the Democrat Party. Right now, they're very splintered. Some of them are going so far left, and some of them are trying to pull them back, and they're splintering right now. And to have someone get up and speak directly to the American people, we know he's going to talk about the wall. Mm-hmm. He's probably going to talk about his economic achievements, which are more than noteworthy.
Right.
And, he's going to communicate. That's a threat to them.
So is there, in your feeling, and I'm thinking here for a moment, that you see the subsequent hearings with Whitaker and with William Barr as means to some way diminish the influence of the State of the Union address?
Yes, I think that's the way. The person giving the Democrat response to the State of the Union is the woman who lost the election in Georgia last year.
Right.
Who has started some kind of an organization claiming that voter ID suppresses the vote and all this other things. She is not particularly eloquent. I don't know who she will appeal to.
That is one of the things that has really surprised me is the selection of for their rebuttal. I have often said that those giving the rebuttal are usually relegated to the backbench politically after giving the rebuttal. They don't tend to work successfully.
They should have given it to someone like Kamala Harris, who I'm not in danger of ever voting for, but certainly speaks very well and is a communicator. Well,
okay. And of course, we're talking about Stacey Abrams, former candidate, Democrat candidate for the gubernatorial race in Georgia. Yes, I am a little surprised by this, and not a high-profile candidate by a long shot. To your point a moment ago, she made some outrageous accusations related to that race. All right, so we're looking at the State of the Union address. We're looking at Stacey Abrams bringing a response. I'm, again, somewhat jaundiced when it comes to the State of the Union rebuttals. I don't think they're very effective, but more importantly, it tends to be a kind of a damaging event for the careers of those who've given it. And I just think of former Governor Jindal, for example, and then was it last year, Representative Joseph Kennedy III. I mean, these are cases where they tend to not go well for the actual presenters. Okay, so going on.
He represented my district in Massachusetts.
Okay, so you know of where we're speaking. Well, is that going forward to the remainder of the week, and I want to touch on this before we go to a topic in your blog I want to go to as well. So you're seeing that the events of the past week, and of course you've mentioned to me off air that, for example, the hearing for the Attorney General presentation by William Barr has been delayed. You think that these delays are intentional to, if you will, diminish the influence and impact of the State of the Union address?
I think that's part of it, and I think that delaying his confirmation hearing to the day after Whitaker's testimony is they're going to try to use that to push the Trump-Russia thing and try to convince us all that it's real, as I believe Mueller's case is falling apart.
Well, falling apart, but for sure, the narrative that the Democrats have been promoting, and I think without going into details, the recent disclosure that the blocked calls that Don Jr. made prior to a meeting with Russian operatives were in fact not going to the president, as was originally promoted by the Democrats. Even CNN has had to acknowledge that, which I find kind of fascinating.
But it's funny, the Democrats have watched their narrative collapse. And I believe as their narrative is collapsing, of course we don't know, Mueller's been very good about not leaking.
Right.
But the media, which will never be on Trump's side, and I understand that, but they're starting to get a little squirrely about being afraid that they're going to get caught up in something that's going to be proven totally false, and their credibility is already below sea level, and they really don't want to take it any further.
Mary, before we move on to other subjects, real quick question for you, and it actually related to an earlier comment you made related to Andrew Weissman and of course, Shirley Powell's book, License to Lie. Is there a sense in your thinking that either the investigation and or the Democrats will attempt to utilize false evidence?
I don't know that they will attempt to utilize false evidence, but they will definitely try to control and create a narrative that looks bad for President Trump. I need to make one more comment about that. As I have said, I lived in Massachusetts for a number of years, and I lived there during the Whitey Bulger thing while he was in power and when he left and escaped and the whole bit. Robert Mueller was in charge of the Boston area for much of that time when Whitey Bulger was an informant. And he used his status as an informant to kill off rival gang leaders.
Right.
And innocent people went to jail because evidence that would have prevented that was withheld. And there were a number of names, and I can't come up with them right now, but there are a number of names involved in this scandal that happened to be in Boston at that time working for the FBI. So that is something to look into at some point. I don't know if that's in my blog or not, to be honest about it. But and all I can think of having looked at the License to Lie, what was the name of the book? Sidney Powell's book, License to Lie.
Yeah.
And there's another Dan Bongino book called Spygate. And you read those two books and you look at the information, and all you can think of is sitting in math class in junior high school when the teacher says, "Why do I always see the same hands?" Because why do I always see the same names coming up in these investigations?
Okay, Andrew Weissman and Robert Mueller. Okay.
And James Comey and McCabe and Rosenstein. The connections are unbelievable.
Interesting observation coming from Mary Griswold, rightwinggranny.com, by the way. Mary, before we wrap things up, just with a few minutes left here this afternoon, I want to talk about one topic that you touch on your blog. And this is, I think, something that sadly is not getting a great deal of conversation. And that is having to do with the New York and now Virginia legislation on the issue of abortion. I'm curious, as you are writing these stories and you've been combining some recent research that you've done about this, I'm wondering, is this, in your opinion, the next great mountain that Democrats are seeking to capture?
Well, it's interesting that the Republicans in the Virginia legislature voted that law down. That's important.
That's a very good point.
So, for whatever reason, well, I think I know the Democrats are moving toward unlimited abortion.
Why?
Because Planned Parenthood is funding their campaigns, and Planned Parenthood is $1 million business.
Okay, so it's political as much as it is cultural.
Well, it's about the money.
About the money. Okay, that's financial. All right. With that said, my question: have you seen a great deal of pushback? I've not seen it in the from not only the media but also from various organizations, and I'm wondering, as you're reviewing this, do you think that this is basically folks keeping their powder dry, that this is going to become a campaign issue of significance as we move into the 2020 season?
I think it will become a campaign issue, but I think the thing that we have to look at as people who support life is that the abortion movement has co-opted the vocabulary. Very true. Very true. Pro-choice means pro-death. Let's be honest.
Right.
Somebody dies every time an abortion is done.
As we wrap it up with you, of course, you come from a very liberal community, Massachusetts. I'm wondering, is there any chance that even in these communities that the, shall we say, the centrist Democrats might be revolted? And I say revolting from the Democrat Party.
I think that's part of it, but the people that need to put their actions where their so-called beliefs are, to me, is the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, when way back in the day when Operation Rescue was going on, I worked as a prayer warrior in a number of protests, and the Catholic Church was out in force, and they really led the way in the pro-life movement. They made their presence known, and they were I think, the first church and the strongest church out there.
Right.
They need to start excommunicating people.
We'll leave it at that with our guest this afternoon, Mary Griswold, author of Right Wing Granny. Go to that website, rightwinggranny.com, to get more details about this and of the other items we've been chatting about today. Mary, as always, thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240.